Hello, cyber warriors. So today we have Mr. John Christley for our English Tech Talk series. Let me give a small introduction about John. So John has like around 30 plus years of experience in cybersecurity background, and he started his career. It started at Army National Guard at 1989, and after that he worked as a manager IT security, and then he worked as a CISO in multiple organization, and then he worked as a chief informational officer. After CISO he worked in a chief informational officer, then a few companies he worked for vice president and a CISO as well. And he is the has some a couple of designations, director of IT security, and then he is the founder of OMC systems. And his core competencies, John core competencies, GRC, SIM, VAPT, and threat intelligence, incident response, and a few corporate cyber security strategy, cyber warriors. And welcome, Mr. John. So thanks for coming for our podcast. And we would like to know. So I'll give a small introduction about our cyber voyage, Mr. John. So the Cyber Voyage channel has been created 2021. So far we have around 450k cyber warriors, and the podcast series. Why we are bringing this podcast in the sense we get multiple questions from our cyber warriors, because a few people they don't know what is cyber security. They'll be asking how the cyber security, how to get into cyber security, and few people they'll be asking like. I'm working as a cyber security professional, but I don't know how to switch a domain. And a few persons from GRC. So there are lots of things that has been working in. Questions will be raised from our cyber warriors, and we would like to start from you. Being 30 years of experience, Mr. John, because when I was looking at your certification, it's 180 plus. So in LinkedIn, I was seeing like 180 plus certifications. Like your knowledge is extremely, it's huge. We would like to know how you got into a cyber security domain, Mr. John, initially.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm happy to be here, Dennis. So thanks for having me. And I'm really excited to talk to those that are interested in either getting into information security or advancing and sort of climbing that ladder and figuring out where can they go next. I was there too. So I got into it, as Dennis said, 30 years ago. I came out of the Army, and cybersecurity was not back then what it is today. Completely different. I think the worst thing we had to worry about back then was the Melissa virus or things like that, a certain kind of virus, not what you see today. So things were a lot different, but I didn't start out in cybersecurity. I don't know anybody that really does. I started out on a help desk. They called it something different back then in those days. Data processing support specialist is what the actual title was, but it was help desk. It was helping users. They would have questions with spreadsheets or word processing or printing, maybe a network connection. And so I had to learn sort of from the ground up. And back in those days, in the early days for me, I didn't know computers very well. I had to learn. So I guess in today's framework of what it would be like, I had to start out kind of at the A plus, network plus. If you're thinking about CompTIA, I had to start there. If I didn't understand back then how networks worked and how protocols and ports and things, I wouldn't have been successful later on trying to get into cybersecurity. So it's been a very interesting and valued career for me. But I had to start out, sort of, I don't want to say at the bottom. I don't mean it, in any kind of bad way, but I had to start out where people start, which is learning computers and learning networking. I learned how to repair computers because back then you actually did fix computers. Nowadays, people mostly throw things away and buy new, but replacing video cards and computers and network cards and troubleshooting network protocols. So that's really how I got my start.
Thanks, Mr. John. So you have given a good insights, and based on your inputs, we have got cyber warriors will be getting. You didn't start with cyber security because you clearly mentioned you started as a help desk domain, and then you worked on spreadsheets and network communication and couple of certifications, and then you just got into a cyber security. And why? Because people mostly ask with us, I do not have a cybersecurity background. I don't know where to start. I don't have anything like background. I just came from the commerce background. I just came from the English background. So likewise, and anyone can come into cybersecurity based on Mr. John insights. And thanks for your insights, Mr. John. And while giving the inputs, you mentioned complaints, and the thing is the overall structured organization. Because based on your experience, we would like to know about the complaints things, because when a person works in a company, and of course they will be having a complaints, because initially people who starts as a initial offensive engineers role, security analyst role, and then they'll be automatically moved to the different management level. And when the person comes as an offensive strategist or offensive analyst, they don't care about management part, because they only focus on the technical part, how to get in hands on. And being 30 years of experience, and we would like to know about the continuous compliance. What is continuous compliance? Because when we go for an organization, and wherever we go, if you go to the conference or if you go to any places, they mention a word called continuous compliance. And now we would like to know about what about the continuous compliance in an organization, and differs from the traditional compliance. Let's say I have a company, and I'll be using this framework, NIST frameworks, and I'll be having certain regulations and certain protocols where I'll be following it. And now, what is continuous compliance, and how to make sure to keep my organization as a compliance, Mr. John?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll go back just a couple of steps here. I was a pen tester throughout my years, network engineer, software development. I've done these roles in my past. And then I got into management, as you say. Some people don't want to get into management. They either they don't want the bother or the hassle. They don't want to have to manage people and issues. But a lot of people are thinking that's sort of where they want to be in their careers. They want to be at the top. They want to eventually become a CISO or a CIO or a CTO or internal audit leadership. And what you'll find as I start to bring this into this idea of compliance and continuous compliance is that you're gonna face compliance on almost any job nowadays. You're gonna hear about it. Either your company or your customer, depending on what kind of industry you're in, they're going to want to be compliant with some sort of compliance regulation or law. It could be SOC 2 or HIPAA or GLBA or NIST, but they're going to want to follow some sort of framework to be compliant with something because maybe they're being audited. And here's where the idea, compliance is usually a once a year thing. Somebody comes in and does an audit. It's usually a one-time thing. It lasts a couple of weeks or maybe a few short months, and then it's over with. And inevitably what happens within most companies is they kind of wait all year for that once a year audit, and then they're very busy. Everybody's running around very frantic, trying to gather things that are being asked of by the auditors. They're gathering lists and they're logging into Active Directory and getting lists of users and devices, and they're trying to prove that they do vulnerability scanning or pen testing, and it becomes a fire drill. Once a year, hurry up. Well, the idea of continuous compliance is that you're doing it throughout the year internally. You're not waiting for the auditor to come in and do the audit. You're doing certain things. You're looking at your lists of active users every 90 days. You're looking at vulnerability results maybe once a month, not once a quarter. Even nowadays, you're doing pen testing. And I know this is kind of there's a lot of controversy about this next topic, but automated pen testing, okay, where it's continuous, where it's all the time. You're doing pen testing against yourself or your customer almost as much as you're doing vulnerability scanning. And why it's controversial is because the use of tools for pen testing, automated tools, especially those with AI built into it, some people don't look at that as being very good or useful. They say it has to be a human. Well, of course it has to be a human. There's still a human running the tool, but the tools can help. Anyway, getting back to continuous compliance, the concept is continually be in this state of reviewing your compliance, reviewing your users and your assets and your security stance so that you're never caught off guard. Now, why? You're never caught off guard for the audit, but you're also not caught off guard for the hackers. If you continually stay on top of things, hopefully you're going to spot issues sooner. You can remediate them quicker. And so that's why this idea of continuous compliance is around.
Thanks, Mr. John, because you clearly mentioned a word. It's a once a year thing, because whenever we work and we are working in a different organization, and initially when auditors comes in, because every 2 to 3 years they'll be coming sometimes. Hey, your company is going to be an auditing thing. So what you these like? It's been like 2 years we have not done an auditing. What you have done? You just show the vulnerability results, and you just show what is the email that you have sent it to across the different team members. Do you have any kind of threat intelligence frameworks? And you have the tool name. Do you have the tool names, and do you have the proper regulation standards which you are following up? And you have 300 critical systems, critical vulnerabilities. Do you have that all the critical system has been remediated? Likewise, it's a once a year thing, but you have mentioned the clear points, Mr. John. So one thing is, the idea is don't wait for the auditing, because even any companies don't wait for the auditing. Always make sure every 90 days keep checking on the report. It could be an any Power BI dashboard, it could be in any Excel sheet, it could be in a centralized dashboard. You have clearly given those insights. And if you have any vulnerability tools, let's say we have an application security, will be having a cloud security, we'll be having a different security tool mechanisms. Make sure to check every 30 days or 90 days whether we are completely compliant framework. And you mentioned the other topic called automated penetration testing. Maybe in another couple of months there is a hyper automation concept as well, because when the tool detects a vulnerability, it automatically remediated, but we are not sure how this will be implemented in an organization. That is also you clearly mentioned. And the final point is, review the reports and review the assets. We will be having a multiple inventory things and inventory dashboard. Always review the asset details. That you have given the clear insights, Mr. John, and thanks for your insights, Mr. John. And now, compliance thing, tools or frameworks, this mostly focus on the established organization. Let's see, because small scale, medium scales companies and all, they don't focus on compliance part. Because even if you looked at a LinkedIn conversation, if you looked at any other places, the small scale company, I'll be having like a 10 plus employees or 20 plus employees. How do I make sure to compliance my system? Because there are more startup companies are coming in India. There are, in particular in our state, so there are more startup companies are, they'll be keep on coming, and they are investing lots into the tech communities. And in that particular time, and people are getting, because they are collecting data from multiple customers, they'll be having a vendors, and they'll be collecting a credit card data, and there'll be an e-commerce application. Now these are all the small scale industries. Okay, let's say if it is Amazon, if it is Google, they don't have a problem because they are established one. But how do I make sure, if I run a small scale company, how to make sure I should be very particularly compliant on all the cyber security strategies, Mr. John?
Yeah, very, very good topic. And here in the U.S. as well, lots of startups, lots of people, starting new ideas, new businesses, and they overlook security and compliance quite a bit because they're worried about getting the business going. They're worried about more customers and revenue share, and security and compliance is sometimes the last thing that they think about or that they want to think about. Now, I could, we talk about a couple of frameworks, compliance frameworks like SOC 2, HIPAA, PCI, ISO, and that can get kind of daunting for people to think about. Oh my goodness, that's big. It doesn't have to be that big, but I would say this to anybody listening: if your company is as you mentioned, taking any consumer data, you're using consumer data. You've got people's names, addresses. And then some of the more private information, social security number, credit card number, home address, these kind of things, these kind of discrete data points that you have that most companies need in order to do the business they're trying to do. You may have, especially here in the US, you may have a state requirement that you may not even be aware of. I think that almost every state here in the US has a state privacy regulation that you must follow whether you are aware of it or not. And if you're not aware of it, you need to ask somebody that can help you figure out what framework, what rule, what law should I worry about or I need to worry about. And the first thing that a vendor like myself, if I was assisting somebody, would come and ask, I'd kind of do a survey a little bit and say, well, let's talk about what kind of data you are taking in and you're processing. And that usually will help us steer us to the right area. Then I look at what state, what country, what area you're in. And it's not always what country or state you are in. It's what state or country the consumer's information is in. So for example, now I happen to live in the state of Florida here in the US. But for example, if I was a Florida-based company, but I had people in my databases, consumers, and they lived in New York, well, I may have to comply with New York DFS as a privacy regulation. And if you don't know that, you'll be unaware of it. And the whole reason that these regulations and privacy and security regulations exist is that if something bad were to happen, if you as a company were to experience a breach or a hacking event, there's notification requirements, there's documentation requirements, and you have to be aware of these. And that's really, I want to say, all it's about. The overarching goal of all of these is to help you become more secure and more compliant. But at the end of the day, we all know that there's no perfect security in any system. And so people may have a hacking incident or a breach. And so these regulations exist to make sure that you as a company, you notify people, hey, we had a breach. We're sorry. Maybe you offer credit monitoring, these kind of things to help repair the damage that was done. Small companies are not immune or exempt from any of these rules and regulations. So it doesn't matter. I deal with a lot of very small companies that are 2 or 3 people or 7 to 10 people, and they have to comply just like bigger companies do. So, yeah.
Thanks, Mr. John. Because you have clearly given like 5 points based on your insights. And first thing is, whatever the state which you are in, based on the state requirements, always collect the privacy regulation. So if you are starting a business, just go with the privacy regulation first. And second thing is, ask with vendors or experts. Because if you are starting a new company, always check with your experts or the professionals or subject matter expert to make sure what should I follow and how I should have to get it forward. And third thing is, what kind of data that you are collecting, because you clearly mentioned if it is an e-commerce application, whether are you collecting credit card information, or if it is any kind of application, are you collecting the PII numbers like personal information, or is any state based, or in like if it is in India, are you collecting any other cards? So likewise, if it is US, are you collecting driving license? So likewise, what data you are collecting, based on that make sure to follow with the regulation. And fourth point is the breach notification requirement, because let's say even though if it is small scale organization, maybe in after some time your organization might have some kind of data breaches. So at that point time, so you need to have a notifications to make sure to go with the public or anywhere that we have got a data breach, so that we'll be start, because even though we followed all these things, that's what you just came. The fifth point is no system is 100% secure. Even though you might have a regulation, you might have a process or protocols, whatever it is, and we can reduce the attack surface, but we cannot protect the 100% of assets. And it was a great insights, Mr. John. And the next question is, will come with the strategical value, Mr. John, because as an organization, you have clearly explained about how about the continuous compliance for my organization. Now, when I improve, like when I say I have a continuous compliance which has been integrated or implemented in my company, how this will affect the overall cybersecurity posture. Let's say we might have a, maybe in my current company I'll be having all the standards, all the process for all the continuous monitoring, but how this will impact on cybersecurity postures. So like let's say the overall like the layered structures or layer based approach, how my organization will be posted with all the activities, Mr. John.
Yeah, so where continuous compliance can help you with your overall information security program and your posture, think of things like this. There's a couple points. One, continuous compliance can usually, the tools nowadays can help you check on an automated fashion so that you don't have to do it manually or you don't forget to do it. Things like, are all of my systems being patched? Now, you may think, well, I've got a patch management system. But if you're not checking it regularly, right, you're not getting that reporting. And again, staying on top of this, some of these can be 90-day checks. Some of these could be monthly where you're reviewing this. But if you review it regularly on whatever interval, you won't be behind. You will not become like we see some of these companies in the news articles. They were breached because they had an unpatched system that was unpatched for the last 2 years, but yet the vendor who made that piece of software had a patch for it, and it was available for many months or years. And so staying on top of these things with this continuous compliance mindset and automation sometimes will help you stay in front of those things. It's also, especially in today's world of cloud, a lot of systems are in the cloud. And whether you choose AWS or Azure or GCP, there's a lot of automated compliance checks that can be done on cloud. I'll use one, for example, if you're in the Microsoft cloud and you've got the right licensing, right? Microsoft, to their credit, they have a secure score where you're able to look at a dashboard and look across all of your cloud deployed assets, and it will tell you it's there for the taking. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's free because it depends on licensing, but it's there for you. It's right in front of your face where it's telling you, hey, you know what? We see that this database over here is not encrypted, or we see that you have these accounts without MFA. It's telling you right there so that you can hopefully get on it. And again, not everything has to be fixed immediately, but this helps you develop what we refer to as a poem, a plan of action and milestone, right? Where you have a roadmap. I like to think of it as a Gantt chart. I'm a project, kind of guy. I think about a Gantt chart where, okay, I can't fix it today. I might need time to fix it. Maybe I need money budgeting to fix that issue, but at least you have it on a plan. If an auditor were to come in and find the exact same thing, you could hold up your plan and say, we already know, and here's our plan to fix it. And usually the auditors will say, oh, that's great. You already know about it. And they'll look at something else. So looking at sort of inadequate controls through automated measures, because especially with cloud, nothing stays stagnant forever. There's always change introduced, even with patches. And you find a vulnerability, so you patch it. Well, that could introduce yet another vulnerability, if not now, down the road. And as we look at vulnerabilities that are found, I like to say this: today's low-rated vulnerability could be tomorrow's high if it's not fixed. So you have to continually look at vulnerabilities, because you don't know the next zero day, the next exploit that is out there in the wild. You have to keep your eye on this all the time, or else you're going to fall behind.
Thanks, Mr. John, because it was a great insight, and of course, every organization is going to face. They are facing such kind of issues. The first thing is tools we can check, because we do have a tools. Maybe the tools will give you stating like, hey, see, your organization will be having a 10 plus or 1000 plus assets, and out of 1000 you have 500 assets are vulnerable. That is a great insight. And second thing is security scorecard. You mentioned about the scorecard. Even many tools they provide you, hey, see, this system A, B, C, D, E, out of A and 1 to 10 and 1 to 100, if it is A, then the criticality is 70%. Likewise, based on the scorecard, we will take it forward, and company can take it forward as well. And other thing you mentioned, there was a breach had happened, like 3 years back or 2 years back. Even the current case studies, if you look at all the case studies, and they mention clearly insecure configuration, misconfigured items. And if you look at the patches has been released by the vendors 5 years back, and that point also you clearly mentioned, Mr. John. And second thing is, you might have a budgeting issue. Some cases, see, let's say we have an AppSec, we have a threat intelligence, we have an IR, we have a SIM, SOC 2. So we have multiple things. But for an EASM, I don't want to go with all these things. I wanted to implement an EASM, but for that I need a budgeting. And for that, you clearly mention a point is plan. If you are going for a budgeting, if you have a plan, then only the budgeting will allocate to you. So that's what even a big organization, maybe you are going to implement a new softwares, but for that we need a plan. And the plan should have a business value, and then the plan should have a proper validation as well. And it was a clear and a great insights, Mr. John. And again, you mentioned a clear point is stating like a patch will lead. And today you may say it is a low. Hey, who cares for you? Because most of the organization they do that. Hey, see, the security scorecard will give you 1 to 100, and we have a 1000 plus critical. Out of 1000 plus, we do have a 800 is low. But 800 low today is low, but tomorrow it will be a critical. And you have clearly mentioned that insight is, if the critical issues is low tomorrow, this is going to be a critical, and this is going to be a high day before yesterday, day before tomorrow, or day after tomorrow. And that's what it was a great insight, Mr. John, and thanks for your insights. And the next question is, even though we do have all the compliance, and there will be couple of gaps will be happening in cybersecurity frameworks, but what could be the gaps can help uncover these kind of items? Because if you go to the any conference, and most of them will be asking these questions, hey, see, I have all the budgeting, I have all the plans, I have all the tools, but I don't know how to mitigate all these kind of gaps. How do I make sure to bring this gap and uncover all these things, Mr. John?
Yeah, so very interesting topic. And every company is a little different, but in my experience, and I want to go back for just a minute to sort of the vulnerabilities. For many, many years, I produced dashboards to show executives and boards, but I always like to deliver it in person and talk about it, because what you see on the paper or on a dashboard is not always the complete story. And here's what I mean. So you could see things on a dashboard where the vulnerability tools are saying, hey, that's a critical vulnerability. But behind the scenes, the story may be it is, but you know what? We have that system behind firewalls and intrusion systems and segmented off on our network and firewalled off. So the reality is it's not a critical for us. Okay. I know it's a critical out in the world. And if that system was exposed to the public internet, yeah, that's a critical. But for us, so there's a story that has to be told. There's context that has to be given to all of this. And I think the same thing goes for gaps. Number one, you have to understand what are the gaps that exist in your company. And the only way that you can find out what the gaps are is to analyze those gaps. A lot of times companies have a hard time doing this themselves internally. Maybe they don't have the time or the expertise because that's not their core business. They're trying to run their business. So I believe in, and I've done this. That's how I became a vendor in my time, was learning by bringing in vendors who are experts in looking at gaps and trying to develop a roadmap and a plan. If I'm going to go and try to pitch a budget to my executives or to the board, I'd like it to be based in some sort of facts as opposed to just my opinion on what we should do next. And so I think it's really good to get outside expert opinion on that. And so I think that's how you develop a plan of what are your gaps. Now, in order to understand and build that plan, you not only look at what your gaps are, but what are your goals as a company? What do you want to do? Maybe and this is what happens in the IT world and IT security world all the time is you'll get an analyst or somebody that says, well, I want lots of money because I want to buy the newest whiz bang box, or tool. Well, how does that fit into the overall company goals and strategy? Maybe that's not anything that they care about at all. That's just a pet project or a pet peeve. And so it's important to align the security expenditures and roadmap plan with the company and their goals. And if you do that, if you say, look, if we go down this path together, arm in arm, right? And when you get people behind your plan in security, and they're the business executives, you tell them how this can help them, how this can enable them. Yes, how this can save them from breaches, but they don't always care about the breaches because it hasn't happened yet. But if you tell them how this can enable them, how this can keep them safer, you're going to have more success. And I think it's also very important, the last little piece here is to make sure your staff as a whole understand security and compliance as much as practical. Outside of IT and security, not everybody's going to care about all the cool things your new tool or box can do. What they want is to understand how it can affect them, how it can make their life easier. I remember back when MFA was first introduced to the industry, a lot of people said, well, I don't like this because this is going to make my login process that much longer and take longer. But when we then teamed MFA with single sign-on, to say, look, yes, you're going to have to, accept this prompt on your phone or go and get this digit that you put into an app. But once you log in, you're logged in to all these apps for a period of time, especially cloud, integrated single sign-on. Then people said, wow, now I see the benefit. This is great. That was way better than it was before where I had to log in at 20 different things separately. So you have to align this with the business objectives for sure.
Thanks, Mr. John, because the first thing you mentioned was it was a great insight. Actually, it's a great point as well, and of course, most of our cyber warriors is going to follow this kind of options. The thing is, if you go to management and say, hey, see, we have vulnerabilities and look at the dashboard, who cares? But what about the impact? That's what you clearly mentioned. Look at the impact and context. If you say SQL injection is there, but that doesn't mean even everyone has an SQL injection. Even if you look at each and every report on all the companies, 100% out of 100, 99.9% will be having an SQL injection. But who cares about SQL injection now? What about the impact to my company? If something goes live, if something goes public, if something goes to production environment, what could be impact to my company? That's what you clearly mentioned. When you go to management, this is what you speak. So it was a great insight, Mr. John. And second thing is, to understand the gap, you mentioned 5 points. One thing is understand the gap. So you might have a gap and it will be a small scale or medium scale organization. What about whatever it is? But look at the gaps. What about the business that you run? and you might have an health industry sector. You comes from health industry, you comes from tech industry, you might be from oil and gas industry, automatic automobile sectors. So look at the sectors and look at the business what you own, and look at the and understand the gaps. That's the first point. Second thing is analyze the gaps, because most company they don't do it, because when you look at the large scale organization, they will be having a lakhs of assets. They don't analyze such kind of activities, and that's what when we go for a small scale or any company, analyze the gaps. And third thing is develop a roadmap, because we are not going to secure all our assets, but we are going to develop a roadmap which is going to secure in future, not the present at all, but in future we'll be reducing our attack surface. And fourth thing is our goal. What is our goal? And fifth thing is how this can enable. Let's say if we have a vulnerability, how this can lead to an attack which cause a data breach. That's what the great insight which you gave. Apart from, finally you mentioned a clear point is, we might have a multiple tools, but tools, who cares? Even though if I'm installing a tool, again I need resource persons to make sure to follow that, to continuous monitoring the particular tool alone. So if I'm going to install a tool, what could be the impact to my organization, whether it is going to reduce my vulnerabilities or else whether it is going to impact my own current job. So it was a great insights, Mr. John, because so far the vulnerability talks and these things and all, mostly they don't follow it, because when the person who start their career, they only focus on the technical part. Hey, I found SQL injection, hey, I found a IDAR, indirect object reference, I follow the OASP. But later on they don't care. Even though if you are finding SQL injection for one day, when you go to management, they see about the impact. So that's what the insights which we got from your end. And the other thing is, the previous question you mentioned about the budget, Mr. John, because budgeting for a established organization, it's not a problem, but for a small scale organization, when they are getting investors, and of course budgeting is very much important now. Even though I have a budget constraint, because as a small scale industries, I'll get like 1 crore money for INR, I'll get some like, or for US dollar $10,000 or $20,000 for an investment for a small startup ideas or for small products. But for that $10,000 itself, how do I make sure to efficiently effectively build a cybersecurity posture in a small or in a less amount, or without any budget constraint, Mr. John? Because this is what 80% they are asking for, because 20% are established one, but the remaining 80% are the startup companies, because the few 30 to 40% are from college students. They have an idea, because they are wanted to pitch those ideas, they got an investors. But now how do I make sure to build an effective cybersecurity program in a low cost, Mr. John?
Yeah, very, very good question. And, I don't think there's any correct answer here. I'll just provide some context on what I think. Whether you have $10,000 US or you have 100,000 or 1 million US, every dollar has to be used efficiently. I've seen a lot of startups and pitch decks pitching to investors. The one thing that I never see, I really don't see that often, is the cost built into the initial ask for the ongoing. So maybe they say, hey, we need $10,000 for IT equipment. Okay. That's usually hardware and maybe some software that they think about, but they don't usually talk about, okay, that's what I need right now, but in 6 months, I need a little more, or in 1 year. There's licensing renewals. There's compliance. If you want to go after certain things like SOC 2 or ISO certifications, that will require outside consultants. I never see that as part of, at least not too often. Not too often do I see all these costs kind of baked in. I think people think that may scare an investor away, but having been on the other side of that, advising investors, I see that if you don't understand what it's really going to take to run the business, you don't deserve that initial round of funding to begin with. It's not just 10,000 or 100,000. There's an ongoing. And I like when I see plans that are built out the best that they possibly can for maybe 36 months, 3 years. Things change, but at least it shows that somebody has thought about what it's going to take over the next, not just the initial ask. I also come from a government environment where we had to ask for budget once a year. And once a year, you got your budget approved, and that was pretty much it, unless there was some devastating issue that you had to go back and ask. But it's that makes you get into this mindset of, I need to be thinking 2 years, 3 years ahead, which is tough in today's world because things change so fast. But you at least need to think about think about more than just your initial, hey, I need some hardware and I need some people. What about the program that you're trying to run? The compliance that you're going to need to comply with to be in that line of business. I see a lot of companies where they go into business and they have a lot of credit card and financial information at their fingertips that they're working with, and they don't have a compliance program at all. And the reason is they haven't been audited, or they haven't experienced a breach, and they haven't had some, regulator come and knock on their door yet. But it could and sometimes does happen, and then they're caught completely off guard. And those are unexpected costs that now they have to come up with, where they could have been thinking about this all along and it could have been baked into the plan.
Thanks, Mr. John, because it was a good input, because this question which we got many from our cyber warriors as well, even in comments also we got we have an idea, and we got I am going to get an investment, but you clearly described those points is no proper understanding. Let's say a person who comes and asking for a money, hey, today I need $10,000 for a system alone, like hardware, but after that he is going to do some kind of malware research. But what about the malware labs which is going to spend? What about the malware sample which is going to spend? And what about the other assets, or whether he is going to host an isolated environment? Of course, he needs some cloud assets, or else it's on-prem assets. And for the on-prem assets, how the cost would be, like per day or per hour, like after 3 years or after 2 years, and you are going to maintain that, because when we are going for a malware research, of course you need to maintain it, and you need to make sure to keep that system alive, and make sure to check whether do we have any threat hunting activities, threat intelligence activities, or else you are going to install any kind of open source software or any kind of thing that you clearly mentioned. The thing is, people are getting and asking a money, but it's a very short period of time. They're not thinking like after 3 years what is going to happen. And you have mentioned a clear statement, if you don't know what is going to do, what you are going to do after 3 years, then you are not going to raise the money now, and it will not be surveyed. And that is also you clearly mentioned. What about the program that you are going to use it, you are going to derive it? Because you are the person, you are the responsibility for the program that you are going to initiate. And if you're not going to initiate with your own money, or which you're going to initiate the money which you're getting from the investors, and after 3 years what you're going to do, and how this money is going to extend, it is not going to the same money, because you need multiple monies. That's what you're going for a budgeting. You need to make sure your plan, it is not about the big or small. You clearly mentioned there is no big, there is no small. It is about the plan that you have, and the plan how you are going to execute in a proper way, that the budgeting will be automatically comes to you when the plan is works as a succeeded one. And it was a great inputs, Mr. John, because mostly they forget to add these kind of points, because they always say, I'm not getting any money, I have an idea, I wanted to get some money, but they don't have a plan, they don't have a roadmap. If they don't have a roadmap, how do they get a money? And of course they are going to get some most of the insights from you, John. Of course they'll be following it in future as well. And now, as a business, because the previously we see about the practical implementation part, and we have seen the continuous monitoring part, but as a business, of course, the trust between client and partners. Because when I say I do run a vulnerability management services, and you can come for a VAPT services, we do have a SOC operations, we'll be giving a 24/7 SOC services, and we do have an EDR MEDR services, and we'll be doing 24/7 services. But now when I go for a client, of course I need to build some trust. And now, how do I build trust with client, partners, and regulators? Because when I start a company, no one will, of course, if I don't have a client, I don't have a portfolio, but who will trust me? But if I want to build such a kind of scenarios from my starting, like I'm starting from 22, at the age of 22, now I'm going to start it. And how do I make sure to build a trust? Because that's what the main thing, that's where soft skills comes in and leadership skills comes in. You clearly mention a point. Most of the person, they go with the technical itself, they don't want to get into management, because there will be a people management, there will be a soft skills comes in, leadership skills comes in, and there will be skills coming in. And at this time, how to build these skills, how to build a trust with client, partners, and regulators, Mr. John?
Yeah, so I'm going to say it starts with, think about this way. It probably starts with when you're going for that investment money. You're going, whether it's an angel investor, whether it's friends and family, whether it's private investors. That's the time to start thinking about this when it comes to trust. Because what I've seen all too often is people go for funding, and maybe they're lucky, maybe they do get money, and sometimes they get a lot of money. for their idea, right? They just have this idea, and it's such a great idea, and the investors throw money at it. But to your point, later on, they come back and they're asking for more money. And I've seen this happen where now the investors are like, wait, why do you need more money? Well, we didn't realize, we understood what it takes to kind of build this widget, build this product, but we didn't understand what it was going to take to run the business. Now we have all these unexpected costs, is what they call them. And I think, why is it unexpected? It's because you didn't think about it ahead of time. It's not unexpected. There's things like hosting and insurance, and then there's compliance. So I want to start there too, because now we get into, how do you start building trust with customers? What I see a lot is that customers who are wanting to buy from a company, they're doing a lot more vetting nowadays than they've ever done before. We're actually, part of our business that we're in, and part of what I do almost on a daily basis, is third-party risk assessments, where our customers are asking us to go and vet a vendor that they want to use. And so I'll be looking for things. There's an established way to do this, and kind of a framework process. But what I'm looking for is, well, do you have a SOC 2 or an ISO 27001? And it's okay if you don't. If you don't, then I have a lot more questions to ask you. Think, questionnaires. But also, do you have certain policies and procedures in place? Disaster recovery, business continuity, incident response, information security, just in general. And the reason I'm going down this path in the discussion is, when somebody does not have anything that I just mentioned, it's very hard to trust them. It doesn't matter how good their product is or how good the idea is. What I understand is that they put all their time and energy and probably money into building the widget, not running their program. So why am I going to entrust that company with my data, or why am I going to advise my customer to put their data in that company's product or service, when they don't have an information security or compliance program to keep everything safe? It really becomes a business differentiator when I can look, and I'm doing this vetting, and I look at one company that has a good compliance program. Maybe they even have a trust portal. That's not a new thing, but a very popular thing nowadays, where you start to ask them questions and they say, sure, go to our trust portal link, and you can look at all these requests under NDA. You can get all these documentation. You can see our business continuity. You can see a summary of our last pen test. You can see, and what I see when I review that as the assessor, if you will, is that they actually have given this thought. They have put time and effort into it, not just the product idea, but the compliance and the security behind the scenes. And I think it makes a big difference. I'm seeing a lot of companies now asking for this as a requirement. Now, let me flip it just a little bit. What if you're the company that has that great product, that great service, and you go out there? How are you going to get your customers? How are you going to get more and more customers? What I'm finding is it's very difficult to attract customers and get them to sign your proposals when you don't have a security and compliance program behind the scenes. They're going to want to know. They're starting, think about a very smart consumer nowadays as a buyer. They're starting to get very smart, and they're like, wait a minute, I'm comparing two different products now. Maybe I go with a product that has a better overall security and compliance, and they can prove it, they can show it. And so I think that becomes a real differentiator today with companies trying to get out there and get more market share. And this all should tie back to your plan, whether you're going for initial investment of money or whether you've been running now for a year. This all should be part of your company roadmap. Is not only how are we going to go out and get the next 1,000 customers, but how are we going to enhance our security and compliance program so we show that we're better and we're different, and we've got all this stuff, because your customers or your prospects, they're going to ask.
Thanks, Mr. John. So you've given a couple of inputs where we can take it in a real-time scenarios as well. And when we want to build a trust with the vendors or partners, you mentioned, do you have any policies? You have a company. If you don't have any policies, why should I invest money on you? So that is the first thing you mentioned. Of course, it was a great input. And second thing is, if something happens like COVID, do you have business continuity planning? So do you have any BCP? Okay, fine. If you have any kind of the CrowdStrike incident, do you have disaster recovery planning? So that's what you mentioned. It is not about the trust. It is about, do you have the process in place if something happens? Because I'm going to invest 1 crore money with you, but in future I do have a customers, I do have a partners or whatever it is, but I'm going to invest some money on you. But if something happens to me, if any data breach happens, what about the next case, how we are going to recover from it? So it was a great insight. And second thing is the comparing thing activities, John. So you clearly mentioned, I'm going to get tools from you. You are going to give some kind of services, and you might providing incident response, you might providing like a threat hunting or intelligence or SOC monitoring, SOC 2 monitoring, anything you provide. But what about the comparison? So you mentioned clearly, I'll be looking at the comparisons as well. See, they have the same tool, the cost wise it is less, because the most of the organization what they do is nowadays, all the tools they have a modules. So they only focus on one tool, then they'll keep as a modules, and hey, so we will be providing you the antivirus, then with the antivirus we will be giving you the EDR, so that you will be, your system will be having 24 hours monitoring. Likewise, they do provide a monitoring and module activities, and what insights that I am going to get from you, because the money is less over there. When you look at your product, the money is less already over there. Then how should I invest on you? Because the money is high, and what is the impact of which I'm going to get it from you? Do you have AI? And now, of course, the cyber wave, we can say the AI is coming in. And do you have AI features? Likewise, we mentioned all these things. I'll be going the comparison part as well. And thanks, Mr. John. It's been like 45 minutes, and I'll going to ask a final question with you, Mr. John, because even though we do have a CISOs, we do have a multiple leadership team, and but still they have some struggle to convince with their partners and managers. Because if you, few companies they know what is cybersecurity. Few companies, if you ask them, hey, we need a budget for 1 crore for this tool comparison, and can you invest on it? And they'll say, why should I invest on cybersecurity? Already you clearly mentioned on first question itself, we don't take care of the cybersecurity part, we care about the business revenues. And at a certain point, of course, as a leadership team, as a management team, I need to convince the investors to make sure to invest on my cybersecurity thing. And what advice you would give to IT leaders, or what advice you'll give for a CISOs to make sure to convince their executive team to invest on the continuous part? Because I wanted to invest on the particular continuous monitoring. How do you convince, and what advice you give, Mr. John?
Yeah, I think what's important, and again, I've had the pleasure of being a CISO 3 times in my career and a CIO once. And I think what's important is open communication, honest dialogue with your leaders, whether it's your, one person is your boss, or you have an executive team, or a finance team, or even a board, or all of the above that you have to report this to. It's very important to have open, honest dialogue. What I mean by this is, a lot of times IT leaders and CISOs, they'll be focusing on what they want. Right? I want new firewalls. I want new whatever they heard at the latest conference they went to, or they saw in some online report. This is the best, but they don't explain why they want it. Okay, they don't really. There's no story as to why should I get that new box. Sometimes the old box is fine. You just haven't implemented all the features or all the tools, or you don't even have the right license for it. So it's not always about getting the newest tool that's out on the market. Now, you don't want to fall too far behind. There should be a continuous life cycle of assets so that they don't fall too far behind. You don't want things that are out of warranty or out of support. That's not what I'm talking about. But just to change, I've seen way too many companies attempt to try to get funding to just change out systems just because. And it's not good. That's not a good use of money. So a lot of times that'll be denied if the people approving the money are smart and they're able to see through it. But I think what has been successful for me, and I've had some good experiences here. I was very fortunate and very lucky that when I went for funding, I communicated a plan. And I said, look, I have a plan. It's usually a 3-year plan, a 36-month plan. It's a rolling 36-month plan. It might change depending on, like, for example, you mentioned COVID. I was a CIO for a city government when COVID hit. Nobody could have expected that. So that's one of those things that happens that nobody expects. And there was no budget. There was no real plan. And everybody just had to sort of open up their checkbooks, if you will, and kind of go off the cuff and figure it out. But there's a lot of other things that can be planned for. And if you work with a business and you say, oh, so we have a part of our business is starting this whole new online part of their business, or they're going into this new geography that they've never been in before. Well, good. How can we support them? And that's what I like to think is that IT and IT security are there to enable businesses. I want to be able to help them and not be in their way, and be able to support them, keep them safe the best way I can. And the way to do that is to partner with them. But if you have this rolling 36-month plan, then there shouldn't be too many surprises, because you could say, look, I'm not saying that I need the money right now. I'm telling you that in 2 quarters from now, I'm going to need $300,000 for X. But if we lease that, that gear, I can get that price down. Like, there's a lot of strategies to try to work into this. And what I relate this to is when you're a child and you're asking your parents for money. It's always a negotiation. I don't necessarily need the money right this minute, but I'm trying to plan for this special present or this special trip this summer or whatever. So you have to negotiate, you have to communicate, because that way, if you do that, nobody's caught by surprise.
Exactly, John. And thanks, Mr. John, because the top 4 points and 5 points of open communication, because when we are going to get something from the investors, and you need to make sure to open communicate it. And second thing is deep dive analysis, we can say. And you clearly mentioned, because they are getting some fundings and they're asking a fundings, but they do not have a plan. Hey, see, this tool is there, we need to implement this tool, but it is not something like a, why do you want to invest? Because we do have a web application security tool already. But again, if some new tools comes in, why do I want to invest the same money on the same tool, the same technology? So mostly when they are asking for money, they do not have a plan, and clearly mentioned they are not doing any deep dive analysis, and then business competitive analysis as well, you mentioned. And third thing is, you said about a real time scenario. You had a plan when you go for your investors or something. You had a plan that is a 3-year plan, and you have also split it out. I don't want money now itself. See, you are going to invest on me on $10,000 for my company, phase 1, first quarter, then invest on $1,000, so that you will get some this outcome. So you had 3 years plan. This is what that you are going to get some the strategic plan with your investors. And it was a great insight, Mr. John, because such kind of plans, mostly they are not following it, and they don't aware of, because such things happens from the experience, because based on your experience we are getting from you. Because when the person who got into a management level in 8 years of experience, they are not aware of, even I wanted to get in the management level, but how do I get a strategical way? That's what experience comes in. So it's been like 45 minutes, Mr. John. So you have given a lots of insights on cyber security postures on a company. So initially you started from the continuous compliance. So as an organization, and you where you started your career, and then as an organization, the continuous compliance, how it will be enrolled in an organization, how this can be monitored like 24/7, and how this can be become a regular activities. Let's say in a small scale organization or a big MNCs or established companies, how they can get into. And later on you got into a strategical value. So it is something like a cyber security posture. When the company is going to implement a process, of course there will be few gaps as well. How to analyze the gaps, and those gaps we got lots of insights from you. These gaps we need to analyze particular activity to make sure to reduce the gap. And you also mentioned a statement, all assets are 100% not safe, and we can reduce the attack surface. And later on you just got into a budget constraint issue, because lots of companies they do have a budget constraint, and you gave many insights on budget issues as well. And the final thing is, you got given a great advice for all the leaders and CISOs, that you are given all the communication part things and all. It's been like 45 minutes. We got lots of insights from you, John, because the cyber warriors, there are many startup companies, founders are waiting and watching these videos. They are going to start a new tech companies, or they are going to initiate a new product. They are going to bring a new product. And of course, your insights will be the huge, we can say, the pearl, magic pearl, we can say. It is a magic pearl for them, Mr. John. And thanks for your insights, John. So, and thank you so much for your time, because 45 minutes time you have spent a lot for our cyber voyage, and it was a great insights from you, Mr. John. And I always say thanks to you, and behalf of my cyber voyage, and it's a great session with you, Mr. John.
Great, thank you. I was very happy and honored to be here, and look forward to anybody reaching out for any kind of assistance or questions as needed.
Thanks, Mr. John.